Hi, welcome to the DRH show, where I have wide-ranging conversations with interesting people. We talk about all things psychology, mental health, and wellness. Today, I'm joined by an actress, a life coach, and a UN mental health advocate, Guila Clara Kessous. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here, Guila. So let's start off with you telling us your backstory, your trajectory in life, and how you ended up doing what you're doing.
Okay, so at the beginning, I'm a performer, an actress, and you mentioned it, a theater actress. And very quickly, I understood that I really wanted to dedicate those theater techniques to help people to better express themselves. And above all, people who suffer from problem of expressions, I would say, survivors and victims of genocides. So I've been working a lot with Rwanda survivors, Holocaust survivors, Bosniak survivor, also dealing with genocides. And then very quickly, I understood that those theater techniques were helping them to better have a catharsis of what they lived, but also to better impact their audience, for them to feel that they were saying the truth. You know, it's always the problem when you have a victim working with them, is that there is this type of fear that they are not believed by the people who are listened. So after working with them, I had the chance to do a PhD at Boston University with Elie Wiesel, who is a Nobel Prize of Peace and who is a very famous Holocaust survivor. And my PhD was about how to help survivors to better express themselves thanks to theater techniques in communication that would be better impactful in terms of impact of the audience, in order to fight for negationism or refusal to admit that genocide happened. After my PhD, I decided to go helping victims directly in the country. So I went to Rwanda and went to also Congo, where I worked with victims of excisions. So then I've done a postdoc at Harvard University, and Harvard invited me to teach a class, Theater and Human Rights. And this is where I discover the beautiful knowledge and the teaching of a professor whose name Tal Ben-Shahar, who is the professor of happiness at Harvard University. So I took his class, and we decided to discover this idea of how to better embody happiness, how to better embody positive psychology through theater exercises. And so this is where Tal Ben-Shahar explained me that my willingness to help the world with my theater techniques should not be only limited to people who have extremely suffered, survivors of genocides or trauma, but should be extended to a broader audience. And this is the time that I got trained as a coach, which is a professional coach.
That is really a dynamic trajectory, and thank you for sharing us your journey. You just captured my interest when you mentioned about, you work with a professor in Harvard about happiness. And I get the sense that there's actually a science behind happiness. So if you could just talk to us on the science of happiness, and why do we need to incorporate it with, with our lives and the way we approach things?
With great pleasure, Dennis. So it is true, and as a European person, as a French person, and I suppose you heard that through my French accent, so I was very skeptical in front of positive psychology, in front of happiness. I was considered that happiness was a personal and intimate field that should not have anybody tell me, how do I live my happiness? How should I live my happiness? And I discover in positive psychology some scientific fundamentals of the field that prove that we can actually measure cortisol, adrenaline. We can measure also all of the hormones that happiness is delivering when you are experiencing this type of emotion. So you have the scientific, the neuroscientific, but also multiple other sciences behind, sociology, psychology, and positive psychology is a mingling of all those sciences in order for really people to understand that the pursuit of happiness is completely natural and normal. And now that the willingness to obtain something that would create an eternal happiness is completely superficial and not true. So really what makes people happy is this notion of pursuit of happiness. And again, I was talking about calculation of hormones. This is exactly how scientifically proved we can have an idea that science is linked to happiness.
And absolutely, it's really good to have a research-backed understanding of, our emotions, including happiness. And of course, this ties in with your work that you just mentioned earlier, that you're helping survivors with their suffering. You mentioned something about, if I'm not mistaken, about genocide, and there's also an area that you work on. So could you just give us a snapshot of how all of this, your work come together? Happiness, working with people, with survivors of genocide, and the overarching idea of positive psychology.
So that's notion of genocide that you just mentioned is basically how do I treat ultimate suffering and make it ultimate joy. So I do not say that because of my action, I created some more joy with people who suffered from genocide, but I helped them to communicate better. So there was something that was locked within themselves. It could be as a conscious secret, because I worked sometimes with people who have never expressed to their family what happened when you're dealing with rape or when you're dealing with trauma. Sometimes, people who suffer from that as victims feel that they are guilty of something. And this is what we see in the first generation of genocide. Usually people prefer not to directly talk to members of their family because they feel that they are guilty of something, even if they are the victims. And so this notion of dying for not talking is something that I'm working with, thanks to theatrical communication, coming on stage and dare to better express yourself with self-confidence. This notion of positive psychology that is working a lot on communication, on seeing yourself out of perfectionism, but with you under perfectionism, and understand that the importance to be human, the acceptance to be human with all of our uncertainty and our doubts is something that is purely linked to positive psychology. Because how could we define positive psychology better than telling people that this is the way to maximize efficiency of human functions in our world. And I like this notion of maximizing efficiency potential also, because it's not only about feeling joyful, it's also how our machine, how our body and soul is in an environment that will help us maximizing our potential to change the world, to even insert ourselves in the world better and find our place. And so by doing this with communication with victims, I was explaining them that by talking, they will not only help themselves with catharsis, they will help others by warning in order for that never happen again. So this was not only by telling them you will feel better, but you will also transmit a knowledge that will be precious. This is your role in life, to transmit this knowledge, to warn people that this exists and they should be very careful. And this is purely a conception of positive psychology, the importance of you feeling better absorbed in the world, but better, I would say, in action with the world, and also transmitting because you're playing your role, basically, like you're playing on stage, transmitting what you have to transmit in that world to others.
Absolutely. And I suppose the fundamental goal of positive psychology is to allow people to better survive during uncertain times. You've mentioned earlier that you've done a postdoctoral research. So have you come across with specific research where it gives us some insights on how to, better cope during uncertain times, say, for instance, the pandemic?
Yeah, so my postdoc was dealing with notion of resilience, and there was a quotient that we were calculating of quotient of positive resilience in order to measure how people break or not break when you have this notion of trauma coming on them or uncertainty that bring out negativity upon their shoulder. And what we see is that there are some tricks that would be considered as positive psychology tricks that people who are better resilient are using. And those type of things could be understood from a matrix point of view. Usually people who resist better, since it's a question of resilience, they position themselves in the matrix that both define what they cannot influence and what they can influence, what they cannot masterize, what they do not have power of, and what they have power of. And this is over. And this is interesting to say that even in a certain time, there are still things that I can have power over. And those things are me, myself, my psychology, my way of interacting with others, my hygienes, my way of taking care of my body. So all those type of things that I can decide or not to do will influence directly the capacity I have to master the situation and to become more resilient. And this is interesting because I remember Tal Ben-Shahar was even saying that we have every day the choice of being happy or not, definitely depending on the action we want to do from our willingness to our eyes. And this is what we are, talking about, seeing the glass half full or half empty. It's always this notion of how do I decide to see reality, because reality does not have an absolute meaning, but only the meaning that I want to give. And this type of approach were completely inside of my postdoc, and I thought that could be very interesting to share with you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And also, did you do any research which links? Did you come across with any research that links happiness with resilience? I know there's a lot of factors involved with developing resilience, such as peer support network, and there are also biological models of resilience. But what about happiness? How does that tie in with resilience?
So your question is very interesting. When you're working with survivors, and I work with Elie Wiesel, but I worked also with Malala Yousafzai, this wonderful young Nobel Prize who fight for the girls' right to go to school in Pakistan, and who was, who was hurt by Taliban's, and she almost died because of this. I worked also with Albert Nsengimana, who wrote a wonderful book, How My Mother Killed Me. And he would explain during the Rwanda genocide how his own mother took him to be killed, by people because she was considered, since she had a mixed marriage, that he was the fruit of the evil. So all those people who survived something extremely difficult, and then put that, of course, in parallelism with what we are living, what we're experiencing in time of COVID, have some secret of resilience by, first of all, as I said, put themselves into a matrix of what can I have power over, what do I not have power over. And another thing, people who really, especially during the trauma and after the trauma, had a pure conscious of what we are calling in coaching the ikigai. The ikigai is the notion of happiness in Japanese, but it's more like, I would say, sense of purpose. It's really more a question of intimate goal. And the ikigai is really answering those four questions, four basic questions. Is first, what do I like? What do I love in life? The second is, what am I talented? What are my talents? In what field am I talented? So the question of what do I love? In what am I talented? And then what am I paid for? Or what do I want to be paid for? And the fourth is, what are the needs of the world and how do I answer them? This notion, what are the needs of the world, is common to all of the genocide survivors, meaning that I have my role to play. What happened to me should not be an excuse for me to die. Some people wanted me to die. Some events, some accidents that happened to me was showing that I almost died from something. But the fact that I survived means that I have something to teach the world. I have something to bring to the world. And this is exactly the link between resilience and positive psychology, is to go further than simply the external environment pressure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's really a wonderful message. The way to look at it is just to really identify your purpose. I suppose that's what they call in psychology meaning making. That even though you've come across with traumatic life events, with adversities, you try to pick out the good bits that you can get from that experience, and how it will allow you to flourish, and how it will allow you to thrive. And essentially, I think that's the core message of positive psychology, that there's always some positive, aspects of whatever we experience. Now, this time, Guila, I'd like to move on to other things that you do, because you have really such a dynamic background. And when I was doing my research, I understand that you also did some cartoons for peace. You were involved in that area. So could you tell us more about it? It's really an interesting, medium, promoting peace, raising awareness about peace through cartoons. How did that go out?
So in 2012, I became a UNESCO Artist for Peace. So UNESCO Artist for Peace is just someone, we call it the little hands.
Yeah,
someone,
congratulations, by the way.
You're so sweet. So just a little hand who is an artist, who is defending through his or her work UNESCO values. And we are, of course, not paid by UNESCO. It's not something that is bringing any money from a political institute, but really more about question of value identity. And this was showing that through the work I was doing, direction, artistic direction, or performing, since I was always performing with some thematics and fields regarding human rights, I was aligned with values of UNESCO. And lately, I wanted to do a little cartoon about resilience. And I decided to work on this wonderful tale that is called The Chained Elephant. And is a wonderful tale by Georges Bucaille, and who was a psychotherapist who was helping his patients thanks to tale. And today I'm using those tales when I'm working with some medical helpers in order for them to find the inner strength they have inside of them, and get the courage and the strength to go on. And so, as you might know, here in France, we have a lot to say thanks to cartoon. We have a lot to defend thanks to cartoon, especially because of what happened with the Charlie Hebdo and lately with Samuel Paty murder. So we have a lot to say thanks to this art. And I had the chance to work with some wonderful artists that helped me to do this drawing and this little cartoon that is only 3 minutes long, but that shows this little elephant who is unchained from birth. And, when he was young, he was trying desperately to get unchained until he became conscious that he could not. And so this is the reflection of a child who is saying, how come such a big animal who could easily unchain himself, stay quiet, accepting his chain? And of course, the answer is, clear. It's because of limiting childhood belief. Even in the age of adult, he thinks he will not be able to get out. And of course, the moral of the story is simply, now take your responsibility and dare to unchain yourself from childhood beliefs that would be limited beliefs, in order to retry something that you might think from a young age could be impossible.
Absolutely. And it really goes to show that, that some mediums which are far more effective in trying to communicate, message of positivity and message of, bringing peace. Like what you've said, it's probably more embedded within the French culture, the European culture, about, trying to live with, freedom of expression using, any mediums that you're comfortable with, be it cartoon or otherwise. Now, Guila, I understand that you also implement some tailor-made approaches to help emerging leaders maximize their performance. Obviously, with globalization, a lot of things has been changing, with when it comes to leadership. So tell us about your work, how you help leaders maximize their potential.
So what is quite fascinating in this entire story is that when I became a coach, I had an entire different audience. And I discovered that the professional audience, and no matter which level in the pyramid, especially from the CEO or the executive committee, have the same fear, have the same problems of self-confidence than people who would be suffering from trauma or genocide survivors. It's always the same question regarding the mental health and the body, this relation to the body that no one is really feeling very comfortable with, unless, of course, you worked with it from a very young age, like actor or dancers or artists. So I would say this relationship to the body in the professional world is still something that deserve to have trainings, workshops, in order for people, when they are in communication, are taking the biggest challenge. And especially right now, the biggest challenge is, how do I appear authentic? Not only how am I authentic, but in my communication, how can I be viewed as authentic? How can I be viewed as not lying? And this is extremely important to see that in the professional life, now today, it's still a question of distrust. You know, all of this environment and all of the plots that people are thinking that's going on around the COVID thing, especially the vaccine and all of this. So all of the environments really maximizing the notion of fear, disbelief, and especially mistrust. And so today, the entire challenge of communication, when people are talking in the professional world, it's how do I reestablish the link of confidence? And so this is what I'm teaching, especially regarding the physical, body approach. And also, of course, all of the word that needs to be said and all of the emotions, especially positive psychology emotions that people today need absolutely to mention in a professional environment. Otherwise, they are just going, somewhere else. That would be the denial of what we are living. And all of the CEOs and all of the top managers that I trained who were in denial, who were pretending that nothing happened, were really failed in trying to get motivated their team. So this is what we're trying to readjust the way they express themselves, both brain and body, in order for them to be able to motivate and find again this inner energy that they need in order to get somewhere with their team.
Absolutely, and of course, I'd like to emphasize what you said about the importance of genuine communication within leadership. It's really important that you have a leader whom you can trust, saying the right things, and also trying to forge a direction of what is good for the business and what is also good for your own well-being as an employee. Now, I'd like to move on to another thing that you do, Guila. You're also a Holocaust Remembrance Ambassador. This is a very important work, so tell us more about it.
Okay, so since I've done my PhD under Elie Wiesel supervision, it was, of course, a minimum I could do to create Holocaust ambassadors. So working at Harvard University with some students in order to create this type of event, trying to have them on stage together with survivors. My work, I would say, is, yes, artistic, but I really define myself more than an artivist. So I'm doing docu-fiction. It's between the documentary and fiction. So each time I'm doing a play dealing with genocide or dealing with, surviving trauma, I always have people who experience that. I always have victims on stage. I always have survivors on stage. And what is very moving is that actresses, could be professional or semi-professional, they are not substituting themselves to the people who suffered. Even when they have to embody a role of a survivor, you have the survivor who is here on stage together with them. And we know that with the Holocaust, for example, you have fewer and fewer survivors of such a terrible tragedy. So it was important for me to create something around the survivor Holocaust ambassadors in order for young people to feel embodied, to transmit the story, and to become, I would say, the witness of the witness. There is something today that is a risk of this transmission that we need to defend. And this is why I decided to create these Holocaust Remembrance Ambassadors.
And yeah, that is really an important project. Like what you've said, every year there's less survivors of the Holocaust, and it's important, for the young generation to, to realize what happened during the Holocaust. And I suppose this ties in with another aspect of your work. You already mentioned earlier the importance of performative arts, the importance of drama. While I was doing research about you for this interview, Guila, I discovered that you mentioned that drama is not just a performance art, but it's rather a socially conscious reflection of what's happening in the society. Now, a lot of people who may not be interested about drama and performance art, um, they might find that drama is just, it's just drama. It's not really a reflection of society. So tell us more about how drama is a good reflection of what happens to the society.
So we have many ways to understand theater. Theater, when you come, let's try to talk business, okay? Because I'm sure that some of our listeners, some of our viewers thinks also about the notion of efficiency. So when you want to sell yourself as a trainer and you're an artist, there is, I would say, immediately this notion of, art should be, I would say, occupational therapy. So when you introduce yourself in front of a CEO or in front of human resources to decide if yes or no, this workshop can be taken as something that will bring something. And I'm saying that, moreover, because of the positive psychology behind, you need to adapt your wordology, I would say, not to talk about positive psychology or happiness, especially when you're dealing with European audience. You need to talk about positive leadership. And you should not talk about theater, because otherwise you will be viewed as occupational therapy, which means like, okay, so after work, we will have 1 hour where people can just do theater, like they do pottery, like they do any type of art. And that would be their way to be occupied in order not to think about something. And they will be more performant after. So this is a way to see arts, to see culture. And you know that in our times right now, our government decided that culture was unnecessary. So this is the unnecessary part, I would say, that is art being beautiful, even if, of course, it's not necessary, because this is what makes people alive. And this is what will remain after, many centuries. Culture will be what remain after our death. But okay, now let's talk about efficiency and let's talk about financial approach. When you tell them, okay, the entire life is theater. What is theater is simply relationship, but put under magnifier. I'm going to teach you a way to rehearse real life. And I will go further than that. In my role game, I will show you how to be more efficient in order to be sure to rehearse this moment in your life that could be a challenge for you. Then people will listen to you with a little bit, I would say, more attention. Let's go further. Augusto Boal, who was a wonderful thinker of drama, made theater become a social tool. So what he created was theater agents, so theater actors, that he would hide in a crowd and create a situation in order to understand the temperature of the society. I'm going to give you an idea, and maybe some of you have experienced something. So he hid it at, let's say, in a bus or in the subway. He decided to have 3 or 4 actors who would be hidden in the crowd. One actor will play the role of someone being violent, and the other will play the person who will be victims. And 2 other people will be put in strategic place in the subway to relay what happened. So let's say you have one actor who is violent with the other, who begin to, shout and to treat badly the other. And then you will have another actor who would say, did you see what happened? And another saying, did you see what happened? And we will see how this entire, I would say, society sample react. If there is a reaction, if there is some words that would be said, or there is a taboo and no one will react. And after that, of course, the actors will leave. Sometimes you have a reaction from someone who is punched the person's face, And sometimes there will be no reaction. But all this is saying something about the society. And so after that, of course, the actors, reunite and discuss, about what's going on and write it down. On that day, at that year, there was no reaction. There is nothing where someone has been extremely violent with someone else. So that's why I'm saying this is a wonderful social tool in order to better understand the society.
Exactly. Well, you were explaining to me how drama really reflects what happens to society. It just reminds me of one of my favorite plays. I'm quite sure you've come across with them. Miss Saigon. It's really wonderful. I did not live on the era of the Vietnam War, but it really speaks to me about the power structure, and it's really an amazing. It's amazing. I think demonstration of how relevant drama is to society. And another thing that you're clearly into arts, because aside from drama, I found out that you were also nominated as fashion ambassador at Harvard. So tell us about your passion about fashion.
My passion about fashion. Well, for me, I was struck that Harvard University did not have any fashion class, any fashion history class. Not again, only for art purposes, but also for financial purposes. Usually it's not that I really want to talk about financial, but usually when you talk financial, people are listening to you. And I was telling them, listen, you should just think that fashion is a field that deserves to be learned, deserves to be discovered by the students. And the administrative answer was, okay, if you want to do a training, if you want to do a workshop or a class, you should not be paid. And I said, I will do it for free. And I got a lot of students who arrived. And so among them, I had the chance to meet with a wonderful student who's named Nick Navarro, who created this eleganza fashion show. And this eleganza fashion show became something big, that was a huge student fest. And we had the chance to have very, very special people such as Jean-Paul Gaultier and some very famous also, some famous role, models. And so, yeah, fashion was extremely important, especially in the notion of reflection of history again and society, regarding also the importance of the relationship to the body. And we understood very quickly in the eleganza that the notion was how to challenge this fashion field in order for that to be more integrating diversities and rejecting any type of shape or origins. And so it became something very I would say very interesting along the year. And eleganza became extremely popular and got transformed into Mélange. And so today we still have a Mélange fashion show, wonderful initiative that exists in New York because Nick went from Harvard and then, of course, San Francisco and New York. And so I strongly advise you to check the website on Mélange to see the new things that would come up, and you would be all very welcome to see the next edition of Mélange.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I'll do, Guila, is I'll put the link on the description box, so anyone who wants to learn more about that, they can check out the website. Also, I'm very grateful that you've written an article for Sacridge. The article that you've written is called Optimalism, and I have to share a story about this. You wrote a story about optimalism because I'm very ignorant about this area. I keep on correcting you to changing the word to optimism, and you told me that they're very different. Optimalism is not the same as optimism. So could you educate us about what exactly is optimalism and how different it is from optimism?
Definitely, Dennis, and thank you so much for allowing me to have this published. So, in fact, we all know what is optimism. Optimism is really, I would say, a positive filter that we put in our eyes, like sunglasses, and trying to find the sun, even if it's raining or even if it's snowing, try to be positive in each situation. I have to admit that in COVID time, in some difficult time, it's very hard to put our, bright and light sunglasses where you clearly see that there is no sun. And so optimalism is interesting. And this is a beautiful word created by Tal Ben-Shahar, the happiness professor from Harvard. And this is when there is a combination between optimism and realism. So the positive filter together with reality. And so we are not denying the difficulty in optimalism. We are, on the contrary, creating those difficulties. And in our decision tree, there is a big branch that is the possibility that this leads into positivity. Of course, we can also have other branch that leads to tragedy, but we can still foresee that there is a possibility that things come up positively. And so that's why it was so important for me to talk about optimalism and not optimism, for people to really understand that there is a way, that is a conscious way, that is a wise way to actually see the difficulty together by trying to keep a certain filter of positive attitude.
Thank you for telling us about optimalism, Guila. Now, for those of us who want to explore more about the intersection of arts and human rights and humanities, basically all of those things that you do, can you recommend some good resources? Probably there's a TED Talk, or probably there's a book. We can learn more about this stuff.
So I would like to, before all, talk about a wonderful individual. And this wonderful individual has been the one to put me in touch with you, who is another wonderful individual. I want to talk about the wonderful work of Shalavit Simcha Cohen that you will find on Facebook, that you will find online through her wonderful work named PosiFest. And I know that you know of it. And I strongly advise you, if you want to find this touch of creativity of art together with the notion of social responsibility, to see her work, because I've done recently a podcast and a video with her, and this, I think, is something that you might like if, of course, you follow us right now. So it was important for me to quote her and to thank her again for putting us in touch. All the things that I strongly advise you are all of the books by Tal Ben-Shahar, especially, I would say, Happier, or The Pursuit of Perfect. That is very interesting, especially for people who are perfectionists and not optimalists. And I know that we have all a tendency of being good students. We have been raised like that. We want to please, we want to do a good job, and sometimes it's killing us. So the acceptance of being human, you will find it in books by Tal Ben-Shahar, such as The Pursuit of Perfect. Another thing I strongly advise you, in especially dealing with the notion of not only how the brain can influence the body, but how the body can influence the brain, are the studies of this other Harvard professor whose name Amy Cuddy. So here too, Dennis, don't worry, I'm going to send you some podcasts, and especially her TEDx about, the power position that are very good in terms of spirit. And to finish, I would like to quote another professor that I had the chance to have while I was at Harvard University. His name is William Ury, U-R-Y, who is the creator of the program on negotiation, and who is really teaching us how to find strategy when you're dealing with obstructive behavior, passivity, aggressivity, and manipulation. And I have to admit that I'm using it so much with my professional and companies background that I strongly advise that each individual know about how to really get a strategy not to be hurt by those individuals that could be passive aggressive. I will advise you to read this book, The Positive No, that you will find, and that has helped so much and so many individuals. So The Positive No, daring to say no to those type of individuals, and understanding to what do we say yes when we say no, and to what do we say no when we say yes, will help people to better affirm themselves, to find their own assertiveness.
So I'll wait for those links that you mentioned, so I could put that in the description box. And just for the benefit of those who are listening or watching this, Shalhavit is basically she's also a PhD student to the same university where I'm doing my PhD, and we really have similar interests, because Shalhavit is doing a research about basically promoting mental health among adolescents through digital intervention, and I've got similar interests, and it's so wonderful for Shall to put us together. And yeah, I've also done an interview with Shall so for anyone who's watching this, just go to my to all the interviews that I've seen, and you will see the interview that I've done with Shall she talks about the intersection between arts and mental health. Now, clearly, Guila, you've done a lot of work about promoting humanitarian rights, important works through the medium of arts, and also through positive psychology. And I'm quite sure over the years, you've encountered a number of misconceptions about positive psychology, about happiness. So if you could kind of identify those misconceptions and address them.
So misconception of positive psychology, I would say frequent, is this notion of positivism, which is the denial of difficulties. Let's say that I'm sick, but I want to be thinking that I'm not. So I'm denying my sickness. I'm in a difficult situation, but I want to see the good in it. And I know that what I receive will be transformed in positivity. So that's why I consider myself not having any problem. So positive psychology sometimes is having this type of misunderstanding being more positivism, and this is the first thing that I really want to put away. Another thing we think positive psychology is, it would be more psychology than positivism. So here there will be, okay, so if I understand the cause of my disease, of my unwell-being, maybe with positive psychology, I would feel better. So this is a misconception also, because you will never ask the question why in positive psychology. Positive psychology is not psychology. Psychology is all about the why, which is basically the causes of the disease, the causes of this unwell-being. Positive psychology transforms the notion of why into how. It's not why am I sick, but more about how can I feel better. So we are trying to understand all the people who say they feel good, they are resilient, even no matter the difference of social background, of financial background, of knowledge, but we are trying to see how they work and what make them really strong, and we try to apply it to the person. So we are not denying the difficulty, we are not denying the causes, but do not expect doing positive psychology to lay down on a nice red sofa and talk about your childhood. This is not what positive psychology is. It's really a way to take the individual from where he or she is in order to maximize the strength of the person, making the person understand that even in the difficulty they are living, there is something that is systematically putting the person together and help the person to go up and trying to find the inner strength of the person. Another thing that is important to know that is not positive psychology is dealing with trauma. Anything that would be linked to a pathology that would require important drugs, for example, cannot be solved by positive psychology. Positive psychology will help. For example, what Martin Seligman, who is the creator of positive psychology, will define, the flourishing individual or the non-flourishing individual. So people who are, I would say, in the slope of depression can be really helped by positive psychology. But people who are suffering severe depression will not be saved completely by positive psychology. They, of course, need to have a medical treatment. So those three things are usually the misconception of what is not positive psychology.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think the important thing to realize here is that the kind of interventions that we may be able to, design through the philosophy or the application of positive psychology is not really a cure everything kind of pill. It has its own limitations, it has its own applications. And I just want to share the piece of research that I'm doing, because right now my PhD focuses on promoting resilience through blogging. It's somehow similar to the kind of area that you're working, you're promoting peace awareness through cartoons. And because firstly, I'm a blogger, so that's really where my passion is, and I want to promote resilience through blogging. And well, when I talk to people about my area, I tell to them that I'm not saying that blogging can really work for everyone in terms of promoting resilience. It might work for some people who are interested about expressing themselves through digital content, but I'm not saying that it's for everyone. Some personality types it might work, some personal types it might not work. So that's really a good message, to have a better understanding of positive psychology. We're not really taking away the role of other fields, and like you've mentioned, the importance of psychiatry, the drug intervention. Now, at this point, I want to ask you, Guila, you've done a lot of work, clearly, and it's all encompassing. You've done work with fashion, with arts, promoting, the experiences of Holocaust survivors and all that. So, what's your big message? What's the most important thing that you want the public to know about Guila?
Well, I think the message will simply be dare to be you. So, and I really like this quote that says that you are the one you have been searching for. So all of these legends, all of this fantasy of thinking that someone else than yourself can give you credibility, legitimacy, or even a little bit of, of recognition. I think if you do not access to that by yourself, it will be difficult to always wait for someone else to give it to you. So I do not say that in our time where we desperately need tenderness, when we need to touch each other, we are simply desperate, in need of just hugging, just a simple hug. And when I say, when I see that it's so hard for, young children to simply hug their, grandparents, I know that we need to have this physical connection, and the theater can help, in order to refine a way to be closely connected to others. But if I had only one message, is this notion of integrity and self-respect. Because if you self-respect yourself, it's not a question of being egoistic or egocentric or completely in love with what you're doing, but simply self-respect in terms of integrity. You will see that you will immediately have a better respect for others, and that others will respect you. So this fear of being eaten by yourself with this type of negative parrot, negative thinking that is you're always in lack of something, you're illegitimate, the fraud syndrome, all of this should be calmed down, and especially the anxiety, even death anxiety with COVID time, just finding a little space within yourself to be at peace and thinking that no matter what, with the trust you have in yourself, you can go through it. We will go through it, I'm sure. This is what I want people to remember.
Mm-hmm. Well, a lovely message from Guila. And also, you clearly have a busy lifestyle. So I'm just interested, how do you relax? What's your distressing outlet?
Oh, wow. That's a wonderful question. So how do I relax? Okay. I don't know if I should say that. Sometimes I have to admit that I'm relaxing while I'm doing what I'm doing. So I have to admit that I consider our exchange as relaxing. You are offering me the most beautiful thing that we can offer me, which is simply to express what I'm doing and to maybe have the chance to help others. So this is my way of relaxing. Now I have to have less intellectual way of relaxing. Spending time with my children that I adore is a way to relax, but sometimes it's a little noisy. Okay, if you're asking me what I like, I do like to read, I do like to have nail polish, and I do like to have some cocktails sometimes. Yes, should I say that I like Malibu? I don't know if I should, but I'll tell you this, Dennis. This is my way of relaxing.
Yeah, absolutely. Ultimately, it comes down to finding an outlet for self-care, whether it's drinking a cocktail or whether it's just reading or spending time with your children. That's all about self-care. And also, I want to ask you, Guila. So, what do you think you would be doing if you didn't work as an actress or as a life coach? What do you think the Guila would have been?
Oh, whoa, that's a very hard question. I would have become a nurse, maybe. I'm so in love with helping others that maybe this notion of nursing would be good. Sometimes I'm feeling that I do not help as much as I would like to, in COVID time. And when you see how heroic our nurses or people in the medical care were helping those people who are sick with COVID, sometimes I wish I could help them more. I'm giving them some bubbles of positive psychology, and they can plug themselves to some of my videos or even live, and I give them some recommendations. So I'm giving that 5 hours a week, and that's great, not only in France but in the rest of the world. But sometimes I'm wondering, if I could be directly with them in the ground helping. So this, I think, is what I should have done.
It is still related to what you're doing, from promoting humanitarian, not just looking after physical conditions, but also mental health conditions. Now, finally, Guila, what else is in the pipeline? And if people wanted to reach you, what platforms can they get in touch with you at?
Okay, so we have a lot to come up. UNESCO, especially dealing with women's rights. So we're doing a lot of things on March 8th with some surprising interviews, with some stars interviews. And when I say interviews, it's not only simply questions and answers, but also coaching session. So this is something that might be interesting, and you can check on the UNESCO website. There are some things also that I'm working on, recording some books, and have been recording a lot of books in French and some books in English. I strongly advise you to listen some audio book. That one is called The Journal of Ellen Baer. It's a wonderful testimony of this French Anne Frank that is beautiful to listen. So I'm still recording some books for children regarding how to teach children positive psychology from a very young age. I'm going to give you some ideas. So the kid is listening and creating his or her own story, choosing what's the weather like and what the internal weather like. So slowly but surely getting to better understand their emotion, and understanding that even if, from an external point of view, outside it's raining, you can find the way to experience happiness inside. So this is what I'm doing together with a nice website that is called Luni, Lunii. I'll give you all of this information too. And so lots of beautiful things regarding resilience too. And here I will be working still with the Harvard University Laboratory. I'm going to send you multiple links also with you, Dennis, in order for people who are interested to know where to get me.
Thank you. Those are really exciting projects. Well, Dr. Guila Clara Kessous, it's a pleasure having you here on the DRH show, and I look forward to hearing more about your work.
Thank you from the bottom of my heart, Dennis. It has been a pleasure, really.
Thank you.